Hey everyone, and welcome back to Trans Digest. I'm Wesley, he, they, your host, and one thing I know I wanted more of when I was going through my MI phase is more information on the history of transgender people. The amount of stuff that gets lost through time is insurmountable compared to what we have, but what we have thus far is a glorious tapestry of transgender history we should know. So today I thought we'd go through the years of the basic history of transgender people. This is part 1, and we'll be going into part 2 in the next historical installment. One thing to note about what we're covering today is that the definition of what is involved with the term transgender has evolved and changed over time and meant different things in different cultures, but it all falls under the same general umbrella. You should also note this list is a little US-centric later on, so just keep that in mind and we'll be diving into other cultures around the world in later videos as well. To get started, we're going to go back to as far as we have possibly listed. This means going back to 7000 BCE to 1700 BCE. In the Neolithic and Bronze Ages, archaeologists located figures and drawings with humans depicted as having both male and female anatomy on the same figures. In what is now Italy, masculine figures depicted as feminine images were discovered in a casual setting, while other settings depicted combined gender characteristics in burials and religious drawings. In Greece and Cyprus, depictions around this era often showed dual-gender figures, or even without any at all. In Prague, a grave was discovered that held bones that normally belonged to the male characteristics, but they were buried in female clothing and with female burial items. There were also plenty of writings during this era on the eunuchs and Enaree. Jumping forward to current era 1 to 1000, we have Philo of Alexandria and Marcus Manilius, who wrote depictions of transgender people during the Roman Empire. Philo stating, expending every possible care on their outward adornment, they are not ashamed even to employ every device to change artificially their nature as men into women. He also attested that some members of this group to that end had their private bits removed. In Germania, Tacitus wrote of the priests of the Swabian tribe called the Naharvali, or Nahanarvali, who dressed in feminine clothing. Another Roman emperor, Elagabalus, was known to adore being known as a mistress, wife, and queen to Heracles. She would dress in woman's clothing and wear long-haired wigs. She even offered an award to any practicing doctor who could provide her with feminine bottom surgery. She was truly a lady of Rome. In 576, the death of Anastasia the Patrician was noted, who lived as a male monk in Egypt for 28 years of seclusion. Despite the history being uncertain as to whether they were just in hiding or fell under the umbrella, they have been adopted today by the community as a transgender saint. Further along in 1322, a poem was composed by Qalonymos ben Qalonymos for a Jewish ethical treatise called Even Bohan. It told the story of the melancholy connected with being born a boy instead of a girl. The poem originally was translated as satire, but can be read as a genuine telling of dysphoria and longing. In 1542, Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca wrote about same-sex marriages in Native American tribes, noting one partner would dress more feminine and do the traditionally feminine tasks. Then, a love story for the age of 1561 depicted Wojciech z Poznania and Sebastian Slotenik, both of which were noted to have female partners. Their unfortunate end came when Wojciech was burned at the stake. In 1586, a woman by the name of Barbara Brunner lived peacefully in Lenzburg. She also unfortunately suffered the same fate, but was forever remembered in portrait, despite its dark imagery. Skipping into Britain colonized America, in 1629, one Thomasine Hall was ordered by the court of Jamestown, Virginia, to wear both male and female clothing. According to a physician's visit, they were found to have a dual-natured gender, meaning Thomasine Hall may have been the first intersex American. Later on in France, right after the American Revolution, a diva and spy by the name of Chevalier finished a dispute with the government on if she could present and live as a woman, also having previously been a spy for the country. In 1781 Norway, one Jens Andersen also found themselves in court and imprisoned after their marriage. When asked what their gender was, they responded, they believe they belong to both. Frances Thompson is the next big figure, as well as a revolutionary herself. She fought and was assaulted in the Memphis riots of 1866 during the Reconstruction era. She was unfortunately arrested for being a man dressed in woman's clothing. Another diva in France came along in 1895 and called herself the Countess. She was a French transgender courtesan and singer. She even published her own autobiography called The Secret Confessions of a Parisian, the Countess. In the same year, the first known transgender organization was founded in the US. The Cercle Hermaphroditos was founded by Jenny June. Then we get to the 20th century where things really begin to kick off. The first person ever known to undergo sex reassignment surgery was Carl M. Baer in December 1906. A year later, the term transsexual was coined to mean between or applicable to both men and women. The term has clearly developed further since then. But I believe maybe the second most well-known tragedy of transgender history and study actually began in 1919. The Institute for Sexual Wissenschaft, a very fun name to say, meaning the Institute for Sex Research. It was created by one Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld in Berlin, Germany. It provided the service and transition surgeries for multiple transgender residents of the country. Dr. Hirschfeld also introduced the German term transsexualismus. This included Lili Elbe, who received emasculation surgery and an ovary transplant in 1930. She was also able to change her legal gender as well. Unfortunately, her transplants ended up rejecting her body and causing her death that year. Dora Richter was the first woman known to undergo fully successful feminine bottom surgery in Berlin at the Institute as well. Toni Ebel and Charlotte Schalak were also patients at the Institute. They both received feminine bottom surgery and were reported as the first transgender couple at the time. They were unfortunately separated during the war, but lived until other trans women were able to receive surgery and care afterwards. There was also a Netflix film documentary out called El Dorado: Everything the Nazis Hate, featuring them and other transgender figures of the time. Then, in 1933, Nazis tragically burned down the Institute and destroyed any documents and studies they could find, leaving the Berlin transgender community torn in their wake. Not everyone was kept down, however, as Dora Richter was able to apply for a legal name change in Czechoslovakia in 1934. She reportedly lived until at least 1939. In 1941, the word transsexuality found its way into the Oxford English Dictionary, which means it had been in use for some time. It showed up for the first time in casual print in 1950. In 1941, the United States also made more strides with Barbara Ann Wilcox, who was able to petition the Los Angeles County Superior Court for a name change. It was one of the earliest known legal cases of its kind in the States. Another huge step in the 1950s came in Israel, where one Rina Natan attempted to perform bottom surgery on herself after petitioning the government for Israel to change their policy on sex reassignment surgeries. The procedure was completed by doctors to save her life. After this, the Israeli government allowed the policies to change. Transgender people even began to make a splash on the big screen. In 1953, the film Glenn or Glenda was released and featured a transgender surgery. The poster for the movie announcing a character with a sex change, this person being intersex and transitioning. The poster itself is a very interesting find. An endocrinologist with the very interesting name of Christian Hamburger published a report in the same year to report on the effect of hormone therapy in transgender women. While the medications had been around for about 3 or so decades, this was the first account of them being used for HRT therapy. He also played a huge part in one Christine Jorgensen's transition. In 1954, Britain had their first widely known press release talking about Roberta Cowell, a pilot in World War II. She was featured on the cover of Britain's popular magazine, The Picture Post. While this particular part of history is on the rocks of uncertainty of whether or not it's true, some view it as the first notable civil rights movement in this decade. This was in 1959 and known as the Cooper Donuts Riot. This riot occurred in Los Angeles and was noted as one of the first LGBTQIA+ uprisings in the United States. Transgender women, transgender men, lesbian women, gay men, and drag queens were arrested by the LAPD for the riot, but the message was clear. We wanted our civil rights. This was only the start of the riots and protests of this nature, one pivotal moment that changed the course of history that led us where we are today. It kicked movements into full gear on all sides of the civil rights fight, more of which we will cover in part 2, where we get into the second half of the 1900s and into the 2000s up until today. Even with just these moments being the footnotes of our history, we've had ancestors to look back and learn from since the beginning of humankind. We'll be eager and excited to cover the biggest events in transgender history. Until then, bask in the history of our ancestors and the strides we've made thus far. And we hope to see you next time for part 2. You can also check out our other playlists on the channel for the 101, current events, reviews, studies, history, interviews, and more. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Stay proud, my trans siblings, and stick with us. See ya!